have been taking care of business. Bachman Turner Overdrive, a little Comcast on demand to get the blood flowing tonight. But I'll tell you, what always gets me going is this great fried chicken from Coons Market. Plenty of time to get your order in for your holiday picnic. No one will make it better than Coons Market. And for the entire family, 7-Up, ladies and gentlemen, big thirst, big picnic. And also Coons Market in Hopewell. This is the Buddy Poppy, okay? They're selling this as we celebrate Memorial Day at the, for donations at the American Legion Post 580, but also in Hopewell this coming weekend as well. Pat Zell from Hopewell VFW will be there, and her husband, Les, and the entire crew, plus a member of the ROTC from Ambridge. So please stop by that Sunday afternoon, Coons Market, Hopewell. I would have been there, but my son is graduating with a graduation mass at St. Ferdinand's in Cranberry for Quigley Catholic. Now, I have got the incredible rock and roller himself, all the way from California, the Golden Coast, ladies and gentlemen, next to the Pacific Ocean, and oh, how sweet it is, Nick Ziegler of the 49teens. But let me just show you something that will make him homesick. You see this, folks? Mrs. Marchand is truly one of the greatest cooks that I think God ever blessed as far as putting her on this earth, right? Her husband, Tony, and I, lifelong friends, used to drink beer shoulder to shoulder at the old Silver Bar, now the Draft House. His son, John, meaning Marchand, and his lovely wife, Amy, his sister, Marianne. And, of course, John's son's big part of my life. So there you have it. I'm going to take a bite. That's incredible. She gave me a lot of them, Marianne did. So I'm going to pass them on to my son. But, Nick, when I say Marchand and I say Monaco, what do you think of?
Oh, geez, yeah, a lot of memories. I know the Marchand family well. Grew up with Strong and the whole family. They're great people.
You know, your dad was a World War II vet. And you, like me, the next generation of the greatest generation, really special meaning. And as I said earlier today, once they pass, I think you have a whole new meaning on what they did as far as also this holiday and what it stands for, Nick.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. The stories that we picked up from them, we just have to keep carrying them on to the younger generation so they don't forget.
All right, now, what's the 49teens doing for the summer of 2017? I'm sure you're rocking the world away, but where are you going to be this summer?
Well, we're working on getting back home to Monaco, the Pennsylvania area. First, we're going to be playing Yankee Stadium with Little Steven's Underground Garage. We're going to be in a house to Roosevelt. Pretty exciting. Yeah,
that is pretty exciting. Listen, you're talking about Sirius satellite radio. And one of the reasons that I wanted you to come here tonight, I want to talk about the Beatles, who have a new channel of their own. Of course, Elvis has got that channel, and the boss, Bruce Springsteen. But the Beatles, a lot of people just don't realize, when you think of their body of work, it was a lot more from 1964 when they came to this country until about 1970 or so when they went their separate ways. Each of them had an amazing career on their own. John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr. So if anybody should be on the air 24/7, it is them. But what amazes me, as I've been listening to just some of their songs of late, was their writing ability. Lennon and McCartney may go down in history as the greatest writing duo ever in the history of music. Fair statement?
Oh, yeah, I agree with you 100%.
You know, when I think of also what they did as far as the Beatles, the early, Twist and Shout, I Want to Hold Your Hand, a lot of that stuff, they kind of grew up in Liverpool, England, listening to people like Chuck Berry and Buddy Holly. But then they really evolved into great writers of some of the most fabulous music. You know, of course, John Lennon and Imagine and Let It Be, one of the Beatles classics in which Paul McCartney's voice is just unmistakable. But then you think of Elvis Presley and how he was an influence of them as well, too. And here he is, died in 1977 at the age of 42. They still play his music day in, day out, 7 days a week, where they reblended a lot of his music to where it sounds as really fresh today as it did when he was first releasing some of this stuff well over 50 years ago. What about Elvis Presley and the Beatles, and also Bruce Springsteen, who I think of because of his good friend Joe Grishecki of the Iron City House Rockers, and they've played many times together. But his durability and his stamina, you know, when you have a chance to listen to some of his live shows from the 80s when he was really starting to bust through with the E Street brand and finally kind of hit the top 40 charts and was selling out stadiums worldwide, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people day in and day out. You know, when you think about how hard that drive was and who he was and how he gave more than 2 hours on stage and he left just sopping wet, and he never ever left anything but everything he had on the stage. And here he is all of these years later, and you listen to some of the live shows from just a year or so ago, and from people that have seen him when he's come to Pittsburgh, this guy is doing the exact same thing that he was doing when the East Street Band, Little Steven and, of course, Clarence Clemens and company and Max Kellerman were doing what they were doing way back then. They're still doing it today at such a high level. So how do you think of these people when you think of their ability and their staying power? And sadly to say, some of them are no longer with us, like Elvis Presley and John Lennon and George Harrison. But their ability to captivate audiences generation after generation, whether they're here or not, whether they're performing live or not, I think it's absolutely uncanny.
Yeah, I saw Bruce Springsteen in '77 at the Stanley Theater, and I just remember the show. It just kept going, and it was like, hey, he just kept building and building and building. And then with the River, he started playing at the arena level. But I think when you're talking about the legacy as well, like he grew up, and those guys obviously came up with the '50s artists, and then when the Beatles hit, that shifted the whole paradigm, and then that's when those guys said, this is what I want to do. And I think that Springsteen's just one of those rare cats, man. That whole team, that him and Gruchecki and Little Steven, there's just something in those guys that is, it's in their blood, and I don't see them giving up ever.
Listen, the thing about Bruce Springsteen, and we'll just focus on him for a minute, because he's still performing somewhat with the same group of people that brought him out of New Jersey to the forefront, and they staged and center spotlight, and he's never left it ever since. But the stamina, getting back to that, he is like a fine-tooled machine, an athlete. I was watching something of him on MTV Live from the late 90s, in which the late, great Clarence Clemens was still wailing that saxophone. And I really had about an hour to sit down and watch him, and I couldn't believe it was not Memorex, it was live. You could see the jugular vein popping and the sweat was popping, and he just, I'm telling you, he never slowed down. Once he hit the stage, it was lights on, and that was it. And he was at the incredible historic Madison Square Garden, obviously just across the river from his home. It was like a home date for him. And this crowd chanting, Bruce, Bruce, and singing along with him. It may have been one of the most religious, spiritual experiences I have ever had. And to hear some of his stuff of late on his radio channel, he sounds just as good today as he did back then. So you have to believe, playing as much as he does, because he's still playing worldwide pretty much throughout the year. I'm sure well over 100 dates a year. That has to keep him just raring to go. But still, he has, as I said earlier, been untouched by the hands of time. It's almost amazing and hard to believe when you see what he's able to do now, well into his 60s.
Right, yeah. He's what is he, like 68 years old, I think. Like, he's that music, the music keeps him in shape, and I'll see videos of him with Gruchecki. They'll be in town, or Gruchecki's in Asbury Park or something, and you just see those guys. There's a fire in their eyes, and it's inspirational.
Before I let you go, we have to talk about their ability to write as well as play music. I mean, it has become a lost art. I love the music of today, but a lot of it has to do with technology, and we see a lot of things happening in music that were just not possible 50 years ago. And if they'd have had the ability, they would have done it. But I think the thing, just like the 49 Teens, it's raw, it's pure, and the energy is there. And when you hear these people live, it's about as good as it gets, because they realize coming up, they couldn't fool anyone by, turning a knob and, tweaking something or using a sensitizer. It really had to be just them. So they made sure that they cultivated and honed their craft, whether it be their voice or whatever instrument they were playing. And I think also they put a lot of thought processes, and Bruce Springsteen tells stories that truly are just like watching a wonderful movie unfold, where it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it leaves you wanting more, and it makes you think. So this is the type of talent, and I mention Bruce Springsteen often because he's still out there doing it on such a high level. I don't know if storytellers like him and musicians will ever pass this way again, Nick. Yeah,
he's definitely in a breed of his own, in a class of his own. Those guys, I don't know if it's, like with Chuck Berry, for instance, he was a poet, and these guys, he learned from that era, and how to put words together, how to paint pictures. You hear his words, and there's a freaks or whatever. But yeah, he has that gift, and he paints big pictures in bold colors.
Listen, I'm going to leave you with this, folks. We are so blessed to have had a chance to really be a part of all of the people that I just mentioned. And whenever you get a chance to hear a Paul McCartney song or a Ringo Starr song, or you get a chance to hear someone that actually knew the King or spent time with some of the Fab Four, the two that are no longer here, the great John Lennon and, of course, George Harrison, you need to kind of step back. Or if you hear Bruce Springsteen telling a story about his friend, the big man, talking Clarence Clemens now, you got to just realize that that's history, folks. And any chance that you get just a moment to listen to some of what they still do today at a high level, maybe if you're fortunate enough to see them with that live concert ticket, I highly suggest you do it, because it's kind of like, the old Bob Seger song, turn the page. Once you turn it, you can't go back. Nick, have a wonderful summer, and we hope to see you back in your hometown soon.
Absolutely. Looking around October, Robert. Pleasure chatting with you as always.
All right, folks. Good night, and let the music play from the Pratt Pack Gym.